Again, continuing on with our theme of lenses, we're going to look at aperture and f-stops. Now, it's been my experience that this is one of the most difficult concepts for novices to get their head around, so hopefully my own way of illustrating this will help you in that regard. So the f-stops are normally referred to as the focal ratio. And now this is the ratio between the focal length of the lens, like in 50mm lens, and the objective lens, that's the front lens diameter. So if we look at this lens here, we can see it's got a focal length of 50mm distance. So that's the distance between the lens and the sensor. When it's focused at infinity, it's a 50mm lens. Now in this case, the diameter of the lens is also 50mm, and that means that it will admit light across, when it's at full aperture, fully open, it will admit light across the entire lens there, bring it into sharp focus on the sensor. So a 50mm focal length lens with a 50mm diameter objective, all we've got to do is divide the diameter of the focal length of the lens by the diameter, and we get an f1 lens, a focal ratio of f1. Now these ratios are referred to as f-stops, and each f-stop refers to a doubling or halving of the amount of light admitted through the lens's aperture. So as these lenses become narrower, smaller size, or we introduce a diaphragm to artificially make the lens a smaller aperture, then each stop that we dial in or dial out doubles or halves the amount of light getting through onto the sensor. Now standard apertures are, now you probably won't find many lenses with a f1 lens, but there used to be at one time, f1.4, f2, f2.8, and each one of these is reducing the amount of light by half. Each time we go, it's half, 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 or double, double, double as we go up that way. Irrespective of it, whether it's a wide angle or a telephoto lens, these all mean exactly the same thing, the same amount of light getting onto the sensor. So let's have a look at a 50mm lens, possible aperture sizes. So here we have a 50mm lens with a focal length 50mm. If it's 50mm diameter, that's our lens, it's 50mm diameter, fully open, we have an f-stop, or an f ratio of 1. 50 divided by 50 is 1. So it's an f1 lens. If it only has a maximum aperture of 25mm diameter, the front lens is 25mm diameter, 50 divided by 25 is 2, or f2. We're now going to reduce the diameter by half, which comes to 12.5 millimeters. 50 divided by 12.5 is f4. And we continue on like this, f8, f16. So each time we've reduced the diameter by half. Okay. But because we're dealing with areas, what we're actually doing is reducing the area by 4 times, which means that each one of these jumps, f1, 2, 4, 8, 16, is reducing the amount of light onto the sensor by a quarter. Well, it's a quarter of the amount. It's 3/4 it's been reduced, but we're only getting a quarter of the light, a quarter of the light, a quarter of the light, a quarter of the light by the time we get down to f16. Now there are intermediate f numbers, so we've been reducing it by area here by double. So now we're going to reduce it by a single f-stop. So if we go down to 35.7mm diameter, we get a ratio, a focal ratio of f1.4. If we halve the diameter again, we get down to 2.8, 5.6. So we've basically gone along the bottom the same sort of reducing by half the diameter as we did along the top. A quarter of the light, a quarter of the light, a quarter of the light. Okay. Now if we link these together, so f1 to f1.4, we're actually reducing the amount of light because we haven't halved the diameter, we've just halved the area now. So it's a 1.4 lens. Halve the area again, f2 lens. Halve the area, 2.8, half, half, half. And we continue on until we get down to f16, f22, f32. And you'll notice that you can work these out in your head really. You know, f1, f2, twice f2 is f4, twice f4 is f8, twice f8 is f16. And we can go this way as well. Okay, 1.4, 2.8, 5.6, f11. So you can work out each individual f-stop if you so desire like that. Now the difference in area between an f1 lens, 50mm focal length lens, and an f16 lens, if it had a maximum aperture of f16, is 8 stops, or we're getting 256 times less light from a f16 aperture compared to an f1. Okay, so hopefully now you'll understand about apertures and f-stops, and it's not that difficult to understand as long as you understand that it's the ratio between the focal length of the lens and the diameter, the objective lens diameter. And of course we can introduce an aperture which reduces, say, an f2 lens to a 2.8 lens, f4 lens, 5.6. And if we were to change the focal length, we'd make that a 100mm lens, and we could do the same numbers again. So make it that a 100mm diameter, 100 divided by 100 would be an f1. But now the aperture, the front lens would actually need to be 100mm diameter to give us the same f1 amount of light getting through. This is why large telephoto lenses, maybe with an f4 lens aperture, a 500mm f4 lens it's got such a wide or large lens at the front in order to get that ratio, this ratio here. So anyhow, hopefully that's given you a better idea.